The world is going to war, folks. The whole world is going to be taken by surprise, but it should not have been. It should not be the case. Paul talked about it. I pointed out Paul's words over and over again in the book of Thessalonians. I believe it's 1 Thessalonians. Chapter 5. I'll go over it just a little bit. Verse 1, but in the times of the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write to you. Well, apparently the world has missed the boat on this one, because the world has no idea what's about to happen. Verse 2, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of Jehovah's wrath so comes as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they, that's the world, shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you as a thief. In other words, Paul is saying you should know when it's about to happen. Now, I'm telling you it's about to happen. In fact, I have a neighbor who says it's already happening. He's a former military young man. Now, in verse 9, we see that there is a parallel to knowing when it's about to happen. In verse 9, if you are awake and not asleep, it does appear that you are not appointed to wrath. Verse 9, for Jehovah has not appointed us to wrath, but obtained salvation by our Master, Yeshua Messiah. Not Jesus Christ, Yeshua Messiah. There is a difference. Now, why does the world not know that it's about to happen? One reason is that the world doesn't know why it's about to happen. It's about to happen because of this. That's right, because of this. It's about to happen because of this. Now, most of the world knows what this means. Okay? But they only attribute it to the Holocaust, the Nazis. For instance, classic example of what's going on right now, Poland does not see past this. Poland does not see past the yellow star. But all of the kingdoms of Europe, including Russia, have participated in this and this. The yellow clothing of shame and the yellow star, forcing the Jews to be exposed forcing the Jews to be third-class citizens in their societies, where the Jews were driven into. Now, Christian doctrine today rejects the truth when it comes to the restoration of Israel, that the time of the Gentiles' domination will come to an end. They reject that. This is part and parcel with the doctrine of going to heaven when you die. You see, what that does is that continues a cycle of Gentile domination in the world and answering only to a kingdom that stays in heaven. So as to deny that the kingdom is coming on the earth in Jerusalem. You see, because those who are resurrected from the dead will not be taken to outer space, a place in outer space. No, they're going to be taken to the New Jerusalem. And of course, the going to heaven when you die doctrine is a scheme. It is a mechanism by which to brainwash the people into believing there will be no kingdom directing the earth in Jerusalem. And that is why you will have a huge portion, if not all, of Christianity coming to fight against the Messiah in Jerusalem. And so I say, it is because of this that this horrible conflagration is going to happen on the earth. I will look for the reason. I think I will try to find a couple of different scriptures, and then I will show you the method that the conflagration on the earth is going to take place by the word of our Father in heaven. As I said before, what everyone needs to do, like I said, in order to understand why Paul said to the Thessalonians that there should be no darkness in your mind concerning when the day of the Jehovah's wrath begins. If it's about to begin, you should know. So there are certain scriptures that you should know and understand, and one of them is Isaiah 24. Not beginning with verse 5, but verse 5 explains the reason why it's happening. Isaiah 24, verse 1 explains that it is happening, and verse 5 explains why it's happening. Behold, Jehovah makes the earth empty, makes it waste, turns it upside down, and scatters abroad the inhabitants thereof. Why? I'll get to that in just a few minutes. And verse 5 does say why, but it does not, how do I put this? It does not completely break it down. It's just a summary, verse 5. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his... So this is going to be on everybody. The politicians too. They cannot escape to their bunkers, is what he's saying. Verse 3, the land will be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for Jehovah has spoken this word. Yes, I said it's going to be by the word of our Father in heaven. Verse 6 says, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. Why? Because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. How have they done that? How did they break the everlasting covenant? Well, when you go to Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34, and when you read Hebrews 8, verses 8 through 12, it describes the everlasting covenant. Word for word. So how did the nations, how did the Gentiles break the everlasting covenant? By forcing the Jews to wear this. By murdering them in their streets. By causing the blood of the Jews to fall on the ground on their lands. And now the blood of the Jews are crying out for vengeance. And this is not just about the Holocaust. As I have said in many of my videos, there have been multiple Holocausts throughout all of Europe. Not one single country in Europe has not been touched. Not one. Verse 6, it says, therefore has the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. This is the reason the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. Now, you should check out Zechariah 12 and verse 9. And then Jeremiah 30, verse 11. Every nation where Jehovah drove the Jews will be destroyed. Every one will be uprooted. Jeremiah 30 is about the restoration of Israel and Judah. The word that came to Jeremiah from Jehovah, saying, thus speaks Jehovah Elohim of Israel, saying, write all these things that I have spoken unto you in a book, for lo, the days come, says Jehovah, that I will bring the captives of my people Israel and Judah, saith Jehovah, and I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. And these are the words that Jehovah spoke concerning Israel and concerning Judah. So Jeremiah is very adamant. Verse 5, thus saith Jehovah, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and not of peace. Why then is Paul saying that when they shall say peace and safety, sudden destruction will come upon them? Because the Jews can see what's about to happen. the rest of the world does not seem to understand what's about to happen here. Verse 6, ask now whether a man does travail with child. No. Why then do I see every man with his hand on his loins as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned to paleness? Alas, for that day is great, so that there is none like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but I always chide Christians because they don't want to read the rest of it. But Israel shall be taken out of that day. They will be removed from the time of Jacob's trouble. They will be extricated from the time of Jacob's trouble. And then he goes on to describe in verse 8 how he's going to do it. For it shall come to pass in that day, says Jehovah of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off your neck. Whose yoke? The Roman yoke. The Christian yoke. From off of Israel's neck. This yoke will be removed from off of Israel forever. And will burst your bonds, and strangers shall no more serve themselves on Jacob. But Jacob will serve Jehovah their Elohim, and the royal line of David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Moshiach, son of David. Therefore, fear not, O my servant Jacob, saith Jehovah, neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save you from afar, and the sea and your seed from the land of their captivity, and Jacob shall return, shall be in rest, and shall be quiet, and none shall make them afraid. For I am with you, says Jehovah, to save you, though I make a full end of all nations where I have scattered you. Now, just in case anybody wonders what that means, let me go to Strong's Concordance. And there is no exception here. After the word where I have scattered comes the next word, asah, 6213 in Strong's Concordance in the Hebrew section. The word means accomplish. The next word, kala, complete destruction. Did you get that? Total annihilation. It's right there. It's right. You go look it up. 3617 kala in the Hebrew dictionary. Total annihilation of all the nations where Jehovah has driven the Jews and Israel. Total and complete annihilation. Did you get that? How is this total annihilation going to happen? It's in Haggai 2, verses 18 through 22. Verse 18, consider now from this day and upward. What day? The 24th day of the 9th month. What day is that? That is the day of the dedication of the temple. Hanukkah. Here's the seed. Get in the barn, verse 19. Yes, as yet the vine, the fig tree, and the pomegranate, and the olive tree has not brought forth from this day. That day, the blessing will occur. Verse 20, and again the word of Jehovah. Oh, and by the way, let us not forget that Jerusalem was freed from the Ottomans on that same day. In, I believe it was 1917, yes, on the 24th day of the 9th month. And this past year, the promise went forth from President Donald Trump's mouth. I believe that's how it occurred. On one day, I think it was either on that day or the day after. Okay? Verse 20, and again the word of Jehovah came unto Haggai in the 24th day of the month, saying, speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, and say, I will shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms. So this total annihilation of these kingdoms is going to happen in what way? I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen, and I will overthrow their chariots. How? And those that ride in them, and their horses, and their riders shall all come down, every one by the sword of his brother. It is going to be Gentile against Gentile. It will be by World War and Civil War. Now, let's go back to Revelation 9 and get a little bit more descriptive. And so I have mused for quite a while what is the description in the sixth trumpet, because we're sitting here with the war in the Euphrates River about to occur, and there it is written right there in Revelation 9 and verse 14. Verse 13, and the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before Jehovah, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loose, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. Now, if you try to go into the Strong's Concordance, you can't, it doesn't provide any wiggle room. It literally means what it says, the third part of men. So I was, looking at this description of verse 17, and it says, I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them having breastplates of fire, of jacinth, and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouth issued fire, smoke, and brimstone. And by these three, that is, fire, smoke, and brimstone, was a third part of men killed by the fire, by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which came out of their mouths. Now, verse 19, I took a closer look at yesterday, and I hope I'm not misreading what John is saying. Let's look at this carefully. For their power to act, authority, is in their mouth and in their tails. Now, let's look very carefully at this. The way this is written. For their tails were like unto serpents, and they have heads. So the tails have heads. Not one head, multiple heads. Interesting. And with them they do hurt. So let's examine this. For their tails were like unto serpents and had multiple heads in the tail, is what he's saying. And with them they do hurt. See, initially I thought that this was talking about tanks and mobile artillery units. But if you look at a mobile ICBM launcher, you realize that that is probably what John is talking about. Because you see, these ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, typically have multiple warheads in them. And if this is what John is describing, he's describing nuclear weapons. Now, for a long time, I did not want to talk about nuclear weapons being involved in this last great war. But it's kind of hard to get around. It's kind of hard to get around it when you have nations threatening each other with nuclear weapons. And what John appears to be describing here is multiple warheads inside of the tail of what appears to be the tail of a serpent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a picture of one of these mobile missile launchers, mobile intercontinental ballistic missile launchers. And you take a look at it and you determine for yourself if you think that my theory is right or not. And the question is, do you honestly believe that anything else that man has formed against himself? Because as Haggai 2, verses 18 through 22 clearly states that Jehovah is going to bring the destruction that is written in Isaiah was it 26 that we just read, upon mankind by his own hand. And it says right here, 1/3 of man was killed by the fire, the smoke, and the brimstone, which came from these, it says, out of their mouths. But you see here, folks, now, I want to point something out here about verse 18. By these three was 1/3 part of men killed by fire, by smoke, by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. But we just read that it's coming out of their tails. Let me show you something. Let's go to Revelation 11. when it talks about the two witnesses, there is a statement that is made, which to somebody who speaks English is a bit strange. Verse 5 of Revelation 11 says, "And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies." Does that mean that fire literally come out of their mouth? Is that what it means? All right. Let's find out what that means. It's very clear that the two witnesses will come in the power of what the English people say, Elijah, but it correctly should be spoken Eliyahu, and I will say Eliyahu concerning this man, okay? Eliyahu the prophet in the days of King Ahab. For exactly the same time that the two witnesses are going to be witnessing, Eliyahu the prophet brought a plague of no rain on the kingdom of Israel and surrounding lands. 3.5 years, exactly the way that the two witnesses did. Now, let me show you something. Second Kings 1 and verse 10. We'll start in verse 9. Then the king sent unto him a captain of 50 with his 50, and he went up to him, and behold, he sat on top of a hill and spoke to him, "You man of Elohim, the king has said, come down." Verse 10, and Eliyahu answered and said to the captain of 50, "If I be a man of Elohim, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50. And there came down fire from heaven and consumed him and his 50. You get that? It makes sense. Fire came out of Eliyahu's mouth. Fire came down from heaven by the word of Eliyahu's mouth. That's how it came. And so, in the same language or use of language, John described the the two witnesses, fire coming out of their mouth. He did that the same way in Revelation 9. And verse 18. By these three, the third part of men, killed by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. Verse 19, for their power is in their mouth. Power. 1849, exousia, power to act, authority. Oh, you see, folks. Which means there were men sitting in the front end of this vehicle directing what was going on in this vehicle. And in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents and had heads, plural. Actually, that is either singular or plural, according to 2776 kafali, or kafale. It's both. It's singular and plural. And with them they do hurt. The word hurt is adikeo, to do wrong, act wickedly, act unjustly towards, to injure, to harm. To do damage. So, this wasn't the sixth trumpet. Men killing each other, wiping each other out, annihilating each other with these weapons of mass destruction. And where does the controversy begin? On the Euphrates River. And it's happening right now, as I keep saying. So once again, I'm going to post a picture of this, and you can decide for yourself whether or not you believe what I'm starting to believe right now. And I know that some may say, well, Henry, you're kind of late for the party. You should have known. Well, I don't immediately, how do I put this? I need to see evidence before I, I need to see evidence. I don't jump onto, like for instance, a rapture train. Never did. Never believed it. And people have been literally consumed by the rapture and by the false rapture doctrine, not knowing that the whole world is going to have to go through this great tribulation on the Gentiles, not even knowing that the tribulation is upon the Gentiles when Scripture says so over and over again. It says so in Haggai 2, verses 18 through 22. Anyway, I hope that you found this interesting, and with the United States government getting rid of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and bringing on Mike Pompeo as a Secretary of State, clearly. Oh, and one more thing. The new CIA director, you need to read up on her. The United States is clearly going on a war footing now. If there has been any doubt before, there should be no doubt now. War's coming.